They came with iron in their hands and stars carved into their flesh. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends and ancient mysteries. This is Before the Thrones, Episode 4, The Andal Invasion, when the old gods fell. For thousands of years after the Long Night, Westeros settled into its shape. The first men ruled their kingdoms. The Starks held the north. The wall stood tall. And in the Godswoods, men still knelt before the Weirwood trees, praying to the old gods as the children of the forest had taught them. The world felt permanent. But across the narrow sea, something was stirring. In a land called Andalos, in the hills of western Essos, a people had risen. Tall, fair-haired and fierce. They called themselves the Andals, and they had something the first men did not. Iron. Not bronze, not stone. Iron. Harder, sharper and stronger than anything Westeros had ever seen. But the Andals carried something even more dangerous than iron. They carried a new faith. The faith of the Seven, the Father, the Mother, the Warrior, the Maiden, the Smith, the Crone, and the Stranger. 7 gods in one. 7 faces of a single divine being. The Andals believed their gods had called them west, that the 7 had shown them a land across the sea, a land of forests and rivers and ancient kingdoms, and told them it was theirs to claim. And so they built their ships, thousands of them. They crossed the narrow sea in waves, not one great fleet, but generation after generation of warriors and families and holy men, all carrying the same burning certainty, that they were chosen, that this land was promised. They landed first in the Vale, on the rocky eastern shores, where the fingers reach into the sea, and the mountains of the moon rise sharp against the sky. And from the moment they set foot on Westerosi soil, the killing began. The first men of the Vale fought hard. They knew the mountains. They knew the passes. But their bronze swords bent and shattered against Andal iron. Castle after castle fell. But the Andals did not simply conquer. They transformed. Wherever they went, they cut down the Weirwood trees. The ancient heart trees, with their carved faces and red leaves. The trees the first men had prayed to for thousands of years. The Andals put axes to them. They burned the groves. They tore the faces from the wood. To the Andals, the Weirwoods were abominations. False gods, relics of a savage age that needed to end. And the old tales say the children of the forest were driven from their forests, hunted in their sacred places, and pushed deeper and deeper into the wild until they vanished from the lands of men in the south. Some fled north, beyond the wall, where the Andals never reached. Others simply disappeared, fading into legend like smoke into sky. The Vale fell first, and it fell completely. The Andals crowned their own king, Artis Arryn, the Falcon Knight. The stories say he flew into battle on the back of a giant falcon and struck down the Griffin King atop the giant's lance. Like so many tales from the ancient world, the legend is larger than the truth. But the result was real enough. The Vale was theirs. And from the Vale, the Andals spread. They poured into the riverlands. The river kings who had ruled for generations were swept aside. New houses rose, Andal houses, with Andal names and Andal blood. They pushed into the Reach, the richest land in Westeros. They took the Stormlands, where even the fury of the Storm Kings could not hold them back forever. They crossed into the Westerlands, the Iron Islands, the Crownlands, kingdom after kingdom, generation after generation. It was not one war. It was 100 wars spread across centuries. Some first men houses fought to the last. Others bent the knee and married into Andal bloodliners, choosing survival over resistance. In time, the blood of the first men and the blood of the Andals mixed so thoroughly in the south that no one could easily say where one ended and the other began. But something survived in those southern kingdoms, even as the old world fell. The names, Lannister, Gardner, Durandon, houses that had ruled since the Age of Heroes kept their seats, not because they defeated the Andals, but because they absorbed them. They took Andal wives. They accepted the faith of the Seven. They let the Weirwoods burn. They survived by becoming something new. But one kingdom did not bend. The North. The Starks looked south and saw everything changing. The Weirwoods burning. The old gods abandoned. The children hunted from their ancient places. The world they had known dissolving like frost beneath the morning sun. And they said no. The Andals came for the North, as they came for everything else. But the North had something no other kingdom had. Moat Cailin. A fortress in the swamps of the Neck, ancient and crumbling, yet placed upon the only road north. 3 great towers rising above bog and marsh, with quicksand, fog and lizard lions on every side. The Andals marched north, and at Moat Cailin they stopped. Time after time, army after army, they threw themselves against the Neck. And time after time, the North held. The swamp swallowed their soldiers. The Crannog men picked them apart with poison arrows from the shadows. The towers of Moat Cailin rained death on every column that tried to pass. The Andals never crossed the Neck, and so the North remained, the last great kingdom of the first men, the last place where the old gods were still worshipped, where the Weirwood trees still stood, where the ancient ways survived. When a Stark made a promise, he swore it before the Heart Tree. When a Stark king passed judgment, he did it beneath the red leaves with the carved face watching. Everything south of the Neck had changed. New gods, new blood, new ways. But in the north, the old world held. And that is what makes the Andal Invasion so much more than a war. It was the end of an age. The children of the forest, who had shaped Westeros since before men walked the land, were gone from the south. The Weirwoods, the living memory of the world, were reduced to stumps and ashes. And south of the Neck, much of the old world was broken, burned, and slowly absorbed into something new. And the most unsettling part of all, the Andals did not think they were destroying anything. They believed they were saving souls. They believed the old gods were demons. The Weirwoods were cursed. And the first men were savages who needed to be shown the light. They carved the 7-pointed star into their own skin before going into battle. They died for their faith as willingly as they killed for it. That is what made them so difficult to stop. Not just the iron, the certainty. And so Westeros was remade. The faith of the Seven became the dominant religion from dawn to the Neck. The Sept replaced the Godswood. The Septon replaced the Heart Tree. A new order rose, one of knights and chivalry, of Septors and silent sisters, of a faith that would shape every king and every kingdom for thousands of years to come. But far to the north, behind the swamps and the ancient stones, the Starks still knelt before the Weirwoods. And far, far to the east, across the sea, the Andals had crossed. Something else was rising. Something the Andals had never imagined. In a chain of volcanic mountains on a distant peninsula, a people had learned to ride dragons. So tell me this, would you have kept the old gods or accepted the new? Write it in the comments. And if you want more stories from the forgotten ages of Westeros, subscribe to Westeros Within, and join me for the next chapter. Next time, we cross the narrow sea to the fiery lands where dragons first rose.